minutes out, members. And I guess this is an opportunity. We don't have to go through all the minutes minute by minute, but if anyone has any corrections or changes that they wish to make, now would be the time. Maybe we can give a minute or two and let Jake get up there just in case someone has their hands raised. Maria, are you able to see if anyone has their hands raised?
I do not see anybody from here.
Okay. Well, we'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes just to make sure Jake gets up there.
I am upstairs and watching the Zoom room now.
So, are there any hands raised in the Zoom room?
At this time, there are no hands raised in the Zoom room. We do have one phone participant. I believe it's *9 to raise your hand that way for the participant.
Okay.
And that person did raise their hand. I'm going to give them permission to speak here.
Okay, great. Is there any way to turn the volume up just a little?
Probably.
I think last week it was really loud. This week it's a little small. Okay.
All right. Phone 7257. I've given you, looks like you're unmuted. Will you please confirm your first and last name?
Yes, my name is Bart Levinson, and I called promptly at 1 and had been on hold without sound. I heard your voice check in at 1:05, and then at 1:10 I gave up and redialed. So if there's something that occurred before a minute ago, I didn't hear it.
That's all right. We just called the meeting to order at 1:11, so you have not missed anything at this point.
Thank you.
All right. With that said, we can move on to our third item, which is establishing ground rules. So the key basically to establishing ground rules is that we all just kind of have a common place as we move forward. Essentially, when it comes to ground rules, I'm not going to get into too many detail, but we want to keep them simple. And the main idea is that we want to communicate respectfully with each other. So, there's certain aspects to avoid, and maybe we can go around and people can suggest different items or different things that they would like to add to the ground rules. But some things you can keep in mind is just try to avoid side conversations, just try to be direct and talk to the task force itself. Try to be respectful of each other, both verbally and nonverbal language. And when it's okay to disagree, it's okay to not speak on something you don't feel comfortable speaking on. You don't have to, address every issue if you don't feel it's the appropriate time and the appropriate place. And with that said, I'm going to open it up for discussion. If anyone has any recommendations on ground rules, Maria, maybe you would like to mention anything in terms of, your experience and any suggestions for ground rules?
Sure. Well, actually, a lot of us have been in committees and boards for years now. So I think that we kind of all have a basic shared culture. But if you are new to a board or a committee, this is a topic that can be contentious. And so we just have to be mindful of that and keep our thoughts on the goals that the board set before us, which was to streamline the existing cannabis use permit. So this isn't really so much a forum to say, we don't want any cannabis in the county, because that ship has sailed. Our job here is to gather a set of recommendations for the board that will enable them to improve the existing regulations. And so I think if we all focus on that, and just Andrew set it up pretty well, just remember that all input is welcome, and we're not here to bicker. That'll pretty much get us where we want to go, I think.
Great.
Okay. Will, did you have some?
Well, a question that came to me through a member of the community, and it's not really a big deal, but she was having trouble finding notifications for when our meetings will occur and or minutes or agendas, therefore. Is all that on the community development portion of the county website? Forgive me if I'm even guessing in the wrong direction.
No, you're absolutely right to address this. I had created the agenda for this meeting 1 week ahead of time, and I had hoped to post it online. Our CDD website and the homepage is currently being redeveloped. So when I sent the ticket into IT to put it up under news and information on the community development page, It is under construction, so it wasn't able to be added to that section.
Got it.
I believe IT put it on the county's website with agendas, but in the meantime, it's always going to be posted out front of the courthouse. In the future, 1 week ahead of the next meeting, so long as IT and our web development cooperates and coordinates, it will be available online at that point. We're also working with IT. We have a recording from the first meeting on August 1st to get it up on the YouTube channel. It has not been uploaded yet, but I just worked with Jake this morning to get that on track. We give him the location on the E-Drive where it's at. And Bart had requested, I was able to send a direct link. So if anyone out there, if it's not available online, feel free to contact me directly. We'll get you anything that you request. So
One related question, and this is, I hope, not a recurring instance with this particular individual, but are we under any obligation to not share an agenda or notification about this meeting? I mean, it's all public, correct?
it's all public.
Okay,
Yes.
just don't want to misstep them.
It's all out there on the public record. That's why I wanted to make sure we had the Zoom room going today with the technical difficulties that we had, because yes, all of this is an open forum.
Very good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Is it on the task force tab as well? On the
On-
CDD page?
On the CDD page, no.
No, okay.
At this point, CDD is under construction.
Kind of like it's locked in stone. We
Yeah.
can't get anything
Got it.
up there right now.
So, but again, you can contact me, andrew.amalong@lakecountyca.gov, or anyone else at the Community Development Department and request it, and they'll get a hold of me. We'll get anyone who needs any of the information or attachments, agendas, minutes, videos.
How about
Just
you
let us-
spell your last name too?
Oh, yes, Amelung, Amelung, for those who have not read it, so.
Okay.
Okay, is there anyone in the Zoom room who has any suggestions for ground rules or comments or questions?
At this time, there's no hands raised in the Zoom room.
I'm just wondering, do we need a ground rule of sticking with the agenda? Maybe have a new business, but you know how somebody in the public might have an issue they just want to hash over for an hour and we're working on something else? Maybe we need to.
True, yes. Well, with that said, if you notice a difference between this week's agenda and last week, or the first meeting's agenda, is that, in fact, I didn't print the updated one, but the one that's uploaded and out front has it. Item number 5 is public comment. So we're going to get to the agenda, the items on the agenda first. At the end of that, we can open up for public comment with a limited amount of time for each person to address an issue. And then I think we'll stick with the 3 minutes, just like Planning Commission. But we can be a little loose with that. But if we're going on for 45 minutes on an off topic, we should probably kind of wrap that up and carry it into the next meeting or the appropriate meeting moving forward.
If I could make a recommendation, it would be great if it mirrored the public input from the board's meeting, in
Okay.
that there is a certain time limit, as well as the task force can't address or take action on any item that's brought up in public input, but we could schedule it for a future agenda.
That sounds great. We can add that to the draft ground rules that I will have available next week for everyone. So,
Do we need to follow any sort of Robert's Rules of Order, or is this just all mostly for discussion purposes?
that is an excellent question.
Discussion purposes.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
We're not quasi judicial.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, with that said, I guess one final ground rule, which is probably the most important, is that when we do get into, the heart of the issue of drafting an ordinance, as we get on different topics, I expect that on certain issues, members will disagree on something, and we should determine whether or not we want to come to a consensus as a task force on any issue or take a vote. I believe, I'm under the impression that the Board of Supervisors intended this task force to vote on issues. That's why they made it a 7 or a 9-person panelist, so there'd be a tie-breaking vote. Is there any comment or follow-up or questions in that regard?
Seems normal to me.
Okay, so when we do come to issues that, different task force members may or may not disagree on, when they do disagree, we can come to a vote on those issues.
think a vote makes it cleaner for history. When you're looking back, nobody's like, I didn't really have, the consensus wasn't. So
Okay.
keeps it clean.
And coming to a consensus can drag the objective on for a much longer amount of time, so. Any comments on that in the Zoom room, or any hands raised?
I see Bart's hand raised, Jacob.
Yes, I have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Last week, there were some people not able to attend. How will that be handled in terms of coming to consensus and voting? And I don't know if you did a roll call at the beginning of this meeting. I didn't hear it.
That is an excellent question as well. We did have one task force member who was unable to attend last week. And, in that sense, it could have been a tie-breaking vote, but we weren't coming to any conclusion on that. We could handle it a few different ways. When it comes to requiring a vote, we could require that all task force members are present for the vote. I know this has been an issue with planning commission decisions where we don't have all planning commissioners in attendance to vote on a decision, and we're receiving complaints on that. Maria, I look to you for some guidance on this, if you have any.
What I think would be a good start is and Bart brought up a really good point. Thanks, Bart, because we didn't take roll of the actual task force members, though the people who were here signed in on the sign-in sheet, and then I just kind of added all the names that I saw listed in the participants. But I think that doing a roll call vote in the beginning of the meeting would be great for the minutes.
Yes.
I don't know that we can require that every task force member be present for every meeting because sometimes things come up, and I don't know that we want to put off votes unless we're kind of divided. So if you miss a meeting, you may not get to vote. Hopefully we'll have a quorum, because otherwise that would be a whole different problem. But we want this task force to continue moving forward, taking into account that people have crazy schedules. So we'll all do our best to be here. That's what I would recommend. We do need some hands raised.
I have another question, if that's all right.
Hey, Bart, if it's different than this one, Nara might be waiting to address this specific one. So if you could hold that question for a second, we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Hey there. Yep. Thanks. So a couple things. The first is that I'm totally in support of having votes, particularly around, anything that might be deemed controversial. It's, we've been appointed by the county to be the responsible party for making some of these choices and changes and tough decisions, and having the votes there is an excellent way to track that, and the way that the government has chosen to have that work up until now. In terms of participation, generally that's if you have a quorum, then you vote on things that that the quorum has showed up for. I think if a committee, if a task force member knows that they're not going to attend the meeting, and they have a strong opinion about something that's on the agenda for that week, I think it probably would be a good thing to have have that communicated to Maria or to Andrew ahead of time. But yeah, holding off on votes just stalls, and then you end up punting on a lot of things, and sort of the having the opposite of the entire reason for the task force occur. So it may be that something is so controversial that you can't reach a consensus, and it has to be continued to the next meeting or tabled until the next meeting. But generally there's already a mechanism for that in place at the county, and I think there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We're here to vote and to make decisions and move this ordinance forward. So
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else with their hand raised?
At this time, we only have the repeat question from Bart.
Okay, Bart.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, my phone is a little slow in muting and unmuting. I have what might be a foundational question. I noticed today that Maria was speaking about the task force being about streamlining the ordinance, whereas my understanding had been that the task force had an overall task to rewrite the ordinance to be best for all of Lake County, inclusive of all, not just whether it is streamlined for the industry or not. And I wonder if someone could speak to that foundational question.
Well, Bart, I could speak to that in a sense that, as we move forward with the objective that you're concerned with addressing all of these issues that were not foreseen in the past, which present a lot of gray areas in the analysis, from community development's point of view, as they analyze these projects, as we write a more comprehensive ordinance that addresses a lot of this, it will also streamline the application process at the same time. So whereas, a lot of analysis and gray areas are present at the moment, as we clarify how we want to approach that as a county, I think in a sense that will indirectly streamline it. If anyone else, has any comments or wants to add on to that.
I think I should add some information. Last week I attended 2 town hall meetings, one East Region Town Hall and the other Middletown area Town Hall. And I've attended multiple of their meetings. And in the last year and a half, there have been many times that the public has spoken out with questions and concerns about the cannabis ordinance. And my concern is that there's not a mechanism for the town halls to have what historically has been discussed in their meetings represented in this meeting, and that it's also being a little bit difficult for the public to find out about and access these meetings.
Hey, Bart, do you know if minutes are taken at those town hall meetings?
Are minutes taken?
Yeah, at the town hall meetings.
I believe they are, but I can't say for sure.
Okay, I'll send an inquiry to the admin office to see if there's any way that we can start receiving those minutes. That might be a good way for us to stay informed on what's being discussed around the county.
Thank you. And what's the intention of the task force in terms of incorporating what the community has been speaking to about their questions and difficulties in living in and amongst the growing cannabis industry in the county?
Well, in that regard, yes, the task force is open to the public. We expect more attendance as we dive deeper into the issues that we're facing. But yeah, we are open to all of these issues from both the cannabis industry, the community, concerned citizens, and any other nonprofit or environmental groups and interest groups that wish to come and raise their concerns. We're here to listen to all of that and factor that into this ordinance.
Thank you. And the Board of Supervisors, as far as I know, have set it up so that there's a Southern representative for South County in Jan Coppinger, and there's a Northern representative. I don't know who that is. Should we, if we are a resident of North County or South County, be contacting our North or South representative to share with them our concerns or questions?
Well, yes, you can definitely contact your representative, and you can also bring the issues just such as you're doing right now, just directly to the task force as well, so that all task force members can hear it. So
I would second that. I think it would be helpful if you brought your communications to the entire task force. I know that the North and South representatives were selected to make sure that we covered various areas and categories of the county. but not necessarily to establish them as the contact. And we wouldn't want to miss out on any public input that could get lost in that type of a process.
I wonder, Maria, if it would be appropriate to contact E.J. Crandall, who headed the town hall meeting that also spoke about at length about issues in regards to the existing experience already being experienced living with cannabis industry.
Well, Supervisor Crandall is aware of our task force meetings, so feel free to reach out to him at any time and see if there's anything that he wanted to convey to our task force. Okay, if that's the end of the questions, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, well, I think we can move on here. I think we do have some basic ground rules established. I will be writing those up and sending them out for your review in the following week ahead of the next meeting. So on to the next agenda item. Let's see here. I'm looking at past week's agenda. Mind if I borrow that real quick? Sure. Okay, now we can move on to the discussion of the vision or creating a vision statement for cannabis. Basically, what we kind of want to come up with the vision statement is just basically a goal or a future hope for what we want to see commercial cannabis turn into within Lake County. We want to make sure that it addresses as much as, well, not necessarily address as much. We want to keep it as simple as possible while also covering all of the concerns and all of the stakeholders. So, you know, we have the cannabis industry, they're present here, they're getting established, and they have their goals, and really a big part of this, you know, the need for this new ordinance is to make sure that those goals are aligned with the other stakeholders, the community members, the communities themselves and residents. So the agenda's been out there. I'm sure a lot of you guys have a lot of ideas for this. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for discussion from the task force members themselves as in terms of what they want to see. So for public comment, if we can hold off on your input at this point and maybe just go around to each task force member and get an idea of what they hope to see. And do we have anyone who would like to start?
How about you give us one? Why don't you start with one and we'll work on yours?
Okay, well, I don't really have a draft one. I'm trying to facilitate, but let's say.
Oh, Nara's got her hand up.
Okay, Nara, let's start with you.
Oh, I get to just unmute myself. That's exciting. I was waiting for the thing to pop up. So I'm not a cannabis business owner in the county, but have a lot of experience working with and implementing cannabis and seeing failures. I would love to have this ordinance look a lot like the county that that's written it, and the industry that's here to be able to normalize cannabis in the way that the wine industry has been normalized and brought into the fold in terms of tourism and accessibility, and to maximize the amount of money that the county itself is able to make, and to uplift these small and larger businesses that have decided to locate here. So I would love to be able to address some of the zoning issues and to work within the existing state framework, which I know pretty well, in order to maximize opportunities for participation, for tourism, and for getting the beautiful cannabis that's grown here in Lake County, getting word out about it. So I'll kick that off as the first thing that I've been thinking about, and in my excitement to serve on this task force.
Okay, that was a good start. Does anybody want to, carry on with that or bring up anything else?
Well, I have something, but I don't know how to word it.
That's okay, we don't have to word
Okay.
anything, this is open
What I would
discussion.
really like to see, or what I guess I'm thinking of, is I want to see all the legal cannabis succeed. I want to see them thrive, but I want to see all of our resources, all our environment and the neighbors to all thrive also, come up with things that makes it work for everybody. And granted, you're gonna have a couple people that won't work for it, but somehow or another, we just gotta come together and make it work. And I do want to see it work, but not at any expense of a neighbor, water, pollution,
Yeah,
environment, so many things we gotta think about, But I had a real concern about commercial cannabis, because I thought this huge grow on the mountain across from me was legal. It was noisy, it's obnoxious and all this, and county was just over my place, and they said, no, that's not legal. So it's like, okay, are all these people complaining about the illegal grows and maybe not the legal ones? Those are things we gotta figure out, that there's a public perception out there, and I had it myself. I didn't know the difference. I thought it was all legal and everywhere. And
that is a good point that we are dealing with, distinguishing legal from illegal cannabis cultivation.
And that's a big frustration for those of us that are compliant farms in the industry, is that for the general consumer or the general neighbor, the only thing that you guys ever get to see is the sheriff's blog, right? And so you're seeing pictures of human trafficking and water diversion and waterways being polluted. And so it's unfortunate that that's what you see. And I think what we can bring with this ordinance is bringing in some of the facility permits and licensing that are available through the state and offer farm tours. I know that my farm is always open to tours. We've had people that support and don't support have come out to tour our farms. And I think that's an essential part of where this eventually gets to, is that we normalize it as nothing different than any other form of agriculture. It's just a different plant. It's farmed just like I have my wine grapes right next to my cannabis, and it's farmed the same. I use the same tractors, a lot of the same inputs. A sustainable industry, and an industry that has the support of ancillary businesses alongside of it, but also that creates other growth and revenue and jobs in the county as a whole. We're not living in a bubble, and the money that we spend at Kelseyville Lumber, and then the employees there have jobs, and it all trickles down. And I think from an industry perspective, we need to take it upon ourselves and actually have initiated an economic impact for the county to see what that actual impact is. Comprehensive, I'd like to see whatever we create to be comprehensive of all the license types that are available from the state, whether it be events, on-site consumption, agritourism, and even if we don't activate that, to have it written and to have a placeholder for it and say, this is what we want to offer when we're ready. I mean, obviously, I think we should be taking advantage of it now. There are some amazing facilities in this county that would draw people. I have an Airbnb on my other farm, and it's booked constantly from people that it's curiosity more than anything. Again, and what Nora said is, an effort to normalize. And so while it's not part of the ordinance, hopefully one of the things that comes out of this is normalizing it and educating the general public about what it is and what it isn't. Because I think what it isn't is more of what is perceived. I think I'd like to revisit zoning, both from more accessibility to farms, because initially we've been zoned out of areas that have traditional ag, that have lots of water and flat ground, and now we're being tasked with or accused of taking water from these areas that we wouldn't have to be in if we had not been zoned out, but also taking into account the neighbors' concerns. And then there's definitely some spots where maybe it is that it shouldn't have been, but because of the way things were done, and keeping in mind that Lake County wrote its ordinance before we had state licensing, and so they were ahead of it, and we didn't know where state licensing would go. And that dovetails into the fact that the state is taking care of so much work that we locally should not have to be doing, and so to remove any redundancies, I want to see the language cleaned up and mirror the state's language and refer to the state's language at any possible time that we can come to an agreement on that. And those are just my starting points. I could go on all day.
Could you state your name as well?
Jennifer Smith.
Because there was no roll call, I saw a
Sorry.
comment come up that we could ask each task force member. And Jan, could you state yours because you spoke a little bit
Jan Carpenter.
Okay. So thank you, Jen. That was pretty comprehensive. A lot of the stuff was things that I've heard, especially in terms of like vertical integration of the industry. I guess an openness and transparency, and I know a lot of planning staff would like to see our ordinance mirror the state as much as possible because it simplifies the process. It makes it easier. We can address more of the backlog if we can address it in that sense.
I'd also like to look into the viability of programmatic EIR. At one point, it had been discussed on the board, and I believe either direction or recommendation was talked about. And it may be, I mean, this is going to be a long process. This isn't going to be implemented anytime soon. So if we have the time to also do a programmatic EIR, that might be a more sustainable way to go long term. Just something to think about.
Yeah, there's definitely benefits to having a programmatic EIR, especially in terms of implementing countywide thresholds. So it's hard to make arbitrary thresholds without having them backed by a study. So, let's see, any task force member in the Zoom room? We've heard from Jan, we've heard from Jen.
We started with Nara.
And Nara.
Do not see anyone's hand raised.
Catherine, would you like to provide any comment or input or even questions?
Yeah, no, I'm just listening to what everybody's saying. I guess my only question is because it's been mentioned twice, the zoning issues. So it seems like maybe there's a problem with that, or I don't know if anybody could expand on.
Well, as we dive into the ordinance itself, we will get into a zoning section and we can review the existing zoning and what licenses and cultivation types are allowed in each zoning district. Okay. And maybe review whether or not that's the best suited zone for that. Like an example that I come across, especially as I feel like the county is reaching its cultivation capacity to some extent, and we're seeing that vertical integration and other use permit applications come in. But like say dispensaries and retail sales, as far as are they in the appropriate zones, it's been a question. That right now we don't have a path for, commercial highway for dispensaries, where in a sense it seems like that might be a more appropriate place. So, I mean, this is just one comment, just throwing that out there. Maria, do you have any comments in terms of zoning and land use and addressing that issue?
Well, I think that now that the structure, the regulations have been in place for a while, it's a good time to take a look and see what's working. Typically, when you're talking about land use conflicts and zoning, it's exactly what it is use conflicts. So things that are having negative impacts, either cannabis on the neighborhood or neighborhood on the cannabis, or, we got the whole wine and cannabis. There's all these different possible things that it's a good time for us to just take a look at what's working. What should we maybe make a recommendation to the board to change?
Yeah. And to follow up with you, Catherine, especially in terms of agriculture, consider that. How is the agricultural community responding to cannabis cultivation and, the compatibility between the two? I mean, they're inherently some competing interests and competing resources when it comes to that. So something to keep in mind.
Also, when the board was first setting up the regulations years ago, their strong sense was they didn't want it near communities. And that's why it ended up, getting pushed out into the more remote areas, which now we're finding has some water concerns. So that could be one thing we could look at. Now that we know what we know, do we still think that it would cause a conflict if we placed it in other areas that we hadn't allowed it before? So, and that'll be a good chance for the board to sort of think about where they feel they are as far as policy. Their position could have changed because it's an entirely new board than when we started, well, mostly, so.
All right, okay. Catherine, Zara, if you can hold off.
Yeah, sure.
If we can get around to the task force members first.
Sure.
Will.
So my name is William Weiss, or Will Weiss. I don't have a grand vision for this, but I certainly think that points raised around the table regarding the appropriate use of resources, about sort of a reasonable accommodation for neighborly concerns without, insofar as we are able, inserting ourselves directly into what might be some niche concerns between certain neighbors. I think that's something we hear about in anecdotes around the county for how this all plays out. It's just there are some folks who hold really strong opinions, and if they are neighboring to a site that may be problematic for one reason or another, that can certainly come to the fore quickly. So I just think we ought to be cautious about how we tread in those categories. But I certainly think that Ms. Coppinger's point about an ordinance that can keep everyone and everyone's interests at heart and in mind is really what our goal ought to be. I think that if I have a vision at all, it's simply that coexistence at the end of all this really needs to be the main focus. And to that point, I think something extremely comprehensive and that is, I don't want to criticize the existing ordinance, but that is more robust, that is sort of able to weather more than a few complicated questions, because there are going to be some complicated questions, and they may not all come up around this table. They may be simply the consequence of what policy we help advise here. But I think that there's, even if it means using broader strokes, or if it means, I don't know if being less specific is the right way of characterizing it, but nevertheless, if we can come up with something that can stand the test of time, I'll be most pleased with that.
No, I agree. I like that comment a lot, especially in terms of, we can't predict the future. There's going to be future issues that we won't anticipate in this ordinance, but if we can provide language that allows it to be addressed in an appropriate way that might not be there right now, that would be really beneficial. So.
Oh, Nara has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to second the idea of a programmatic EIR for just ease of again, for staff time and for applicant time, and then also just as we've been saying, there are going to be places where looking at the moratorium, doing a lot of broad strokes hasn't always been the best approach. I think if we look at parcels where perhaps cannabis wouldn't be allowed, but another agricultural use could go in that actually uses more water than cannabis. I think we have to start looking at that as well. So it's like maybe it's a moratorium if it's a brand new water use, or maybe it's a slightly more intensive application process. But I think there are a number of sites on the county where former walnut farms and the like, where the water use that's permitted or allowable or even currently happening is by a factor of by a fairly large factor, depending on the use and the mechanism for watering, and using those and putting forward those uses, that cannabis would actually be an improvement in terms of the water table. And so that there are ways in which I think, what we're talking about, fitting something into the neighborhood so that the community around it is for the most part happy. You're not going to make everybody happy, but I do think looking at it on an individual basis, on strictly from the land use and the water use, and this is part of that normalizing, where it's like, if this wasn't cannabis, would we be really excited about the fact that we've got this, incredibly sustainable crop that has a great deal of state and local oversight into water usage, land management, spraying of pesticides and things like that, where we may have allowed other industries and other agricultural crops to do more of those things than we've allowed cannabis to, and how could cannabis actually be helpful in terms of managing the needs and the water uses for the county. So.
Okay, thank you, Nara. I guess we still need to hear from, Rebecca and Robert.
Rebecca's not, I don't think Rebecca's here. And I don't think Robert's here.
She requested the Zoom link this morning and I sent it to her. Maybe she wasn't able to log in. Well, I guess, let me finish this note right here. I guess with that said, I can follow up with both Rebecca and Robert over the next week and get their input on it and come back with a written vision statement. I'll send it out a week ahead of the next meeting so everyone can review it and hopefully provide some comments. Good luck with that? Okay, thank you. I'll take all the luck I can get.
I've been taking notes too, so
Okay.
you may end up with a number of things that can be integrated into a statement.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
A lot of these are kind of overlapping and can be put into one single statement because keeping it simple and to the point is very beneficial. So.
Did you want to open that up to the public?
Yes, let's go ahead and open up to the public now. First, let's take public comments on the vision statement, and then we can open up to public comments in general. So, any public comments on the vision statement?
We do have some hands up here.
Okay.
First hand we have up is Bart.
Okay.
Thank you. This is a comment about the vision. Our situation in Lake County is actually very complex, especially because of the 1,200-year drought that we're currently experiencing. 60% of our county has already burned in wildfires, and our fire risk is increasing. Our roads are not necessarily built for heavy industrial use or traffic, and in fact, many of the roads that are used by large grow projects are also essential evacuation routes for people who live on that road. Also, neither water resources nor code enforcement have a seat at this table or the ability to speak to what resources are actually viable for Lake County and sustainable. And then the final thing is it's important in our vision, I think, to be realistic about the health of our county staff, who we certainly appreciate enormously, that they've had to take on the burden of so much short staffing. What would be realistic to create in an ordinance that will work in Lake County for the people who live here and for the people who make our county government work and run?
Okay, thank you, Bart. That was a really comprehensive comment. To respond to a couple of things, or I guess maybe not at this moment, but we can come back to some of that stuff. Anyone else
We have Paul Bernaccio with his hand raised.
Yeah, Paul, I thought he was going to be here in person actually, but I'm glad he made it at least virtually.
Yeah, thanks for calling me out on that one. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I just wanted to thank everybody for, having the bigger vision for Lake County cannabis in mind, and knowing that we're writing an ordinance not for the situation here, but for the future of cannabis in Lake County, because there's a lot of other businesses and things that we need to support these farmers, especially small farmers, because my cultivation license is very small. So I understand how difficult it's been with the market as it is as a whole. So just keeping that in mind, because when you want to process or when you want to manufacture inside the county, it becomes very difficult. So I just wanted you guys to keep that in mind, and I really appreciate you all coming together for this. And I will be attending the other meeting, so don't you worry.
All right, thank you, Paul. Let's see, is there, I guess whoever's next, I can't see the list, so.
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, Zaro, you're here. Would you like to speak to it?
I'd like to say something. It's a very good thing that it's time to change the ordinance. It's been old ordinance. You read it, it's 3-4 pages. And I just want to say I'm behind David's idea that we have to stay together with the grape growers, with any agriculture, because in the end, the cannabis is agriculture. it's not right there yet, but it will be. So I just want to say that we have to focus also on to making it easy for the permits, of course, and easy for the cannabis cultivators to get there, because time is killing. And the water, we can do a lot more to save the water with the cannabis, because when you use the greenhouses, when you use all those buildings, you can conserve water. The water can conserve and put it in the tanks. I'm not going to go into details, but we can consume less water with the dripping systems, with all that stuff. So the cannabis at the end is not going to be the most water usable plant. And also, if we have a land, I think we have the right to choose what you can use it for. I got grapes, and I'm trying to do cannabis too. So they both can go together, and they go together. The county proved it. A lot of people doing both things, and they're successful in that, in some way. Also, I just want to say that we really need the ordinance more than cultivation. We need not only dispensaries. We are in the tourist country, right? We need people to come visit and spend money. Napa already taking the wine people, right? So why don't we be the cannabis, the cannabis tourism, county that people come and spend money. So I think we should do that focus on that, on the ordinance, that we can get different licenses and we can use it, for even for the small people like us, not commercial, cannabis companies.
When you're talking about cannabis tourism, sorry to interrupt, what sort of uses or permits are you thinking?
Bud and breakfast.
So on-site consumption.
Because this is, wine testing and bud testing. A lot of people would like to come and check. We as a small county, we have to have, that's my vision, and I want to say it. We have to have AAA product, not much, but, we have to have a different product that Humboldt, Trinity, because they already say they are Emerald Triangle, right? So what's the Lake County? Lake County has got better climate, it's got better opportunity, we can grow better wheat than them, and I bet on that. So if we got that, we can have people come test it, and buy it. Like the wine, it's simple wine testing. It's going to be a bud testing. They're just going to try it. I have a few friends, they're local guys, they have their own strains. Nobody has it. Nobody has those strains, and they're working on that. We have an idea in the LCCA that we can have the brand, Lake County brand. It's a long way. It's going to take a lot of work, but we can do that, and we can be recognizable, with the Lake County cannabis.
So just so I understand you, looking for options for cannabis tourism uses such as on-site consumption or special events that help to bring people in.
Special events, and when it's possible, we can ship it. Like a membership. You buy a membership in a winery.
I don't know that we can do that one yet, because that's federal.
You can do that in California.
Can you mail? I don't think you can mail cannabis. Yeah, but we can take a look.
Okay.
All right, just making sure my notes have it.
Jennifer said, maybe we can put it in the ordinance, and when the time comes, we'll be ahead of all of the counties around, right?
Yeah, there are some bills working their way through the state right now. But yeah, right now you cannot legally mail cannabis. There are there are businesses that have been built around sort of box clubs. But that's done within the existing mechanisms that the state provides.
What about rolls? Not yet?
Not for shipping.
Not for shipping, even?
There's some interesting programs that can be created within the existing framework, in working in tandem with your local dispensary is how I've been able to do some of that.
How about awareness of active legislation at the state level? Is that something that we'd want to?
That's a very,
Okay.
Not push your girl on that.
Good.
Yeah.
Because that's a moving target. But being able to see ahead is just as helpful when we're trying to make something that's going to be useful over the long term. So that was good. Thank you.
Well, just a question. What do you mean? Like, that we would be aware of bills that are taking shape in the legislature, but that have not necessarily received committee or like full legislative vote?
Well, I think
That's
oh, yeah.
a lot of a crapshoot, right?
that is very true. So I am limiting it to awareness rather than, let's not spin our wheels on every bill that, pops up today and is gone tomorrow. So.
I think that's where a robust ordinance can come into place with the proper language. We can anticipate.
Yeah, like we can anticipate there's gonna be a farm to consumer program at the state level at some point in the next 2 years. So I think that that's something that we should have at least a sideline, like vision for at some point when this becomes possible. How do we want to see it enacted in Lake County?
Okay. Some of these comments, they remind me, especially as we get into the tourism topic that has, come to CDD a lot more in 2022 since this spring and the summer, and as workshops have occurred, we are hearing a lot more about the tourism aspect, and it's already been kind of mentioned, but how can the cannabis industry help support local economies as well? How can they complement each other and even increase revenue with different tours? You go down to wine country and you see these buses that are going around from vineyard to vineyard. I have heard people in the cannabis industry, requesting some kind of mechanism or pathway to achieve something similar, which could also complement. It doesn't have to just go to cannabis cultivation. It can, support Main Street businesses.
So, and there are other municipalities that have that framework and that are trying to operate those models. Some of the things that make it a little bit prohibitive here are the badging systems that we have to have, and that everybody on the farm needs to have a background check. In other municipalities, anybody that's on the farm less than 90 days does not have to go through a formal background check, which is fantastic for harvest workers. I mean, we use the same same farm labor contractors that other agricultural crops use, yet they don't have to have those employees background checked to harvest. So the same thing plays into tourism, right? If you want somebody to come out and tour your farm, you don't really want to have to say, oh, well, look at it through the fence. So there's, nuances that need to be massaged in our own ordinance to take advantage of the broader.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I think also some board members have mentioned that about the background checks and how we need to revisit them from, I guess, a viewpoint from 2018, and we've seen a lot of differences. So that is something we will get to.
I sadly have to go.
Okay.
But thank you.
It is that time.
I'll be on
I
Zoom.
guess with that, let's, any other public comments?
Is that discussion of vision public input?
Well, yes,
Or are you
we,
moving on to
actually,
public comments?
any other public comments on the vision?
We do have one hand raised here from Margot.
Yes, thank you. I have a question that was brought up during this section. What is a programmatic EIR, or is it an EIR?
EIR, yes, an environmental impact report. So I guess to explain it simply, when we're conducting our environmental review, as required by the state and CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, you look at a project and you try to identify the impacts of the project. Certain projects, for certain reasons, could be exempt, whether it's a statutory exemption at the state level or it's a categorical exemption, just because of the category that use falls. That often happens if there's an existing building and the use isn't different. There's not going to be much changes to the environment. But when you're building something new, you're going to look at all the different impacts that use can have on the environment. You could either determine that in terms of a broad range of topics, from aesthetics to hydrology and geology to transportation to wildfire, there's a list that we go through, and we can come to the conclusion that for this little section and that impact, there's either no impact or less than significant impact, or less than significant impact if you do these mitigation measures. If you do this and you do that, then you're going to prevent it from having a significant impact on the environment and the surrounding, setting, whether that be a community or just the natural environment itself. If, after you go through all of that, and even with the mitigation measures, you cannot guarantee that there will not be a significant impact on the environment, then you would be required to do an environmental impact report for that project, for that use. And that's how they work with individual projects. So whether you want to build a hotel and casino, or you want to cultivate cannabis, or you want to build a shopping mall or a strip mall, they all have to go through this process, a gas station, so to speak. A programmatic EIR would be a county-wide environmental study for one specific use, in this case, cannabis. So we would work with a team, essentially. It's hard for any one person to be an expert on all these various subject matters, from hydrology to geology. But essentially, the county would facilitate putting together a county-wide study on how this one industry would impact the county. And once that is completed and it's verified and it's peer-reviewed and it's accepted, then it can be a very powerful tool when looking at individual projects as far as how they fit in with the programmatic EIR. I think, Maria, do you want to expand upon that, or?
No, you got it.
Okay, so that's essentially how it works.
Yeah, the whole goal is if the county's doing a programmatic EIR, then all the applicants have less that they have to do, because we don't have to keep recreating the wheel every single time with every single project. So it would sort of be the framework under which all projects would need to conform.
But would sort of, if I may ask, would sort of presuppose a certain level of uniformity among the projects that would be applied to by this EIR, right? I mean, it's sort of like, it presupposes that every operator of this type operates this way. Is that right?
It has the potential for that. It's not necessarily going to do that, but yeah, it can provide certain guidelines that we may be reviewing on an individual project by project discretionary basis. It can help determine that, overall, looking at all the projects, this one way of doing it is not good for the county or the environment. So, it can help us address that and, through the ordinance essentially, or through other mechanisms, limit that negative impact that we want to prevent. So
there would be some limitations because the projects would have to prove that they were in conformance or that they weren't going against the EIR.
Okay. Thank you.
You guys started? Did you start it?
no.
Nope.
No, not yet.
Nope.
It's gonna be outside company though, I guess, right?
We haven't even talked about doing it yet.
They do a lot of.
It would definitely be an outside company because it's expensive. We haven't identified funding. The board has not said, go do this.
Yes.
I have a very good guy for you.
You can tell that to the board of supervisors.
In the state.
Contact your supervisor.
Yeah.
So,
We have Bart and then Paul.
okay.
Hands raised.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So much. I'd like to address something that's already the case with the amount of grows that have been permitted on Kuta Creek, which is an essential watershed for Lake Berryessa that supplies part of the water for the Bay Area. Already 17 projects have been approved on Kuta Creek, and as of 3 months ago, 17 more were in the queue. CEQA does address the need to look at accumulative impacts, and I'd like to speak up for that and make sure that that's addressed as you create a sustainable ordinance that really works for the health of the county, the health of the watershed, and the health of the industry. Also, we have a severe housing crisis in Lake County, and I'd like to see incorporated into our thinking and our planning about the pot industry is how will workers be housed? What's the plan that each individual project has to accommodate their own workforce, as well as their own firefighting and fire safety abilities, capacities, and their use and needs of essential evacuation routes. And then finally, we've already experienced that the market has had an extreme price drop, and already growers have said to the Board of Supervisors that they can't afford paying their taxes. How will that be incorporated into a sustainable vision for a healthy industry in Lake County?
Okay, thank you, Bart. Those are some excellent comments. I can't wait to dive into some of those topics in future meetings, especially in terms of cumulative impacts, because this is a new industry. No one knew what the cumulative impacts would be, but you know, geospatial analysis and GIS is one of my specialties. That's one of my passions, and we're finally seeing the data come in where we can start taking a closer look at that and getting better answers that are data-driven, you know, rather than the speculation that we've been faced with over the initial few years of this industry. And yeah, the rest of those comments, housing is a huge issue. We are in a housing crisis. How does that affect? Great topics to bring up. Thank you, Bart.
I think we lost Paul. I'll let you know if he comes back.
Paul, okay.
But he's not here.
All right, well, we'll give Paul a couple of, well, until I finish a few sentences and hopefully he can come back. But I think we can start wrapping that up. We've kind of thrown a lot of really great ideas. We're going to bring them together and, I'll send out some proposals. We can kind of touch upon it in the first few minutes of the next meeting before moving on into the next topic. But with that said, I'm going to close public comments for the time being.
Oh, real quick, Andrew.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. We did have Paul drop back into the Zoom meeting.
Okay, Paul, go ahead, and then Will wants to speak after that. So.
Okay. You guys hear me?
Paul, we can hear you, but we didn't hear you clearly.
Oh, okay.
You sound better now.
Excellent. So just, you guys kind of remind me about one thing, and that's advertising. Like, I have a lot of family that lives down in the Bay Area, and one of the main things that they see up here is advertising from the casino. So that brings a lot of those people up to Lake County, and that's free advertising that's done by the businesses. So there's sort of like a hand-in-hand relationship that can go on here, where we're bringing more people up here for tourism through it, whether it be, the Airbnb style ideas on farms or something.
Ooh, Paul, we may have lost you there.
Sure that he's not muted, but we can't hear him.
He went down in a pothole.
All right, well, that also is.
So that's sort of,
oh, here we go. Paul, could you repeat those last few things? I think you cut out for a little bit.
yeah, sorry. I was just saying, there's not a lot of products that we can make here that say Lake County made and ship around the rest of the state. So having the businesses help advertise tourism up here is just a good, hand-in-hand relationship that we can have.
Okay. And, I do want to bring this up before we move on to Will's comment. It is something that I heard a lot from the industry over the past few months is, and it relates to a vision, is a kind of Lake County certification, certain standards, and especially environmental standards that, can back up a product and they could carry that certification. So that's an idea that has been floated around, and we can maybe keep that in mind as we move forward. So
we have Bart's hand up again. Bart, did you have something new to add? Maybe she just left her hand up.
Well, my comment
Yeah,
is
go ahead.
it's just a point of order thing.
Super.
Did we need to accept and file the minutes from earlier, or was that simply a review and move on? I don't know if there's the requirement.
we did it, yeah, I under the impression we accepted. We brought up the minutes and reviewed, and any changes, requested changes. Did
Sure.
you have any?
I have no request to change. I just didn't hear a motion to the effect or anything of the sort. So I was just checking if that was something we meant to do or not.
Okay, to verify that, motion to accept the meeting, or accept the minutes, sorry.
Would you like such a motion? I can.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move forward with that motion.
Okay, great.
I'm in favor.
Okay.
I just didn't want you to adjourn and not have done
No,
that. I didn't know if it mattered.
Good point.
That's a good point.
Good, yep.
So, All
I
right.
do have a comment for vision, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. Public safety, the sheriff's department, where there's extreme shortage of staffing. How will this task force be able to craft an ordinance that actually works for the labor force that the sheriff actually has and can manage? And that applies also for code enforcement. Neither of them are at this table, and yet I feel that the task force has to keep in mind what actually are the needs for public safety in Lake County.
Okay.
Is that within scope on the ordinance?
Yes, I do want to respond to that in the sense that one thing to keep in mind as we move forward to this ordinance, we can't include anything that we cannot enforce. So that it kind of limits what we can enact. So we need to be able to enforce that. And Bart, with you, you mentioned a couple of times that code enforcement's not at the table and water resources and the sheriffs are not at the table. As we move forward and we address these issues, this task force is open to everyone joining the table. So I will be making open invitations for specific subject matters. And when we get to those issues at those meetings, we can invite, the relevant people to come in and weigh in on the issue. In fact, with that in mind, next meeting, Patrick Sullivan from Tax Collectors is going to be joining the meeting, and he will, speak to how the cannabis taxes have operated and how they've changed and how they're working and, what we're facing in that sense. So as we move forward, we can address all of this and make sure everyone is available at the table too. So, and with that, I guess we can go ahead and close public comments unless there's anything.
Well, that was
anyone
public
else.
input for discussion of vision.
Close public vision comments.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any public comment left outside of what we just talked about. But that's your next item.
That would be the next item. Any general public comments, not necessarily as they relate to the vision.
I see Margot's hand up. Hey, Jake, can you unmute Margot?
Yeah, sorry, I think I asked them to
Oh,
unmute.
sorry.
Thanks. Cool.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes, you are.
we can hear
Okay,
you.
so here's my question, and it may be a process question. So is this the proper time for the public to propose topics for the task force consideration? Or,
Yes.
oh, okay. So my suggestion for the task force is, as the ordinance and the permit processing is being revised, to add on the permit a section where the applicant grower states an estimate of water usage. Because right now, the permits do not ask the applicant to estimate a total water usage per
We
grow.
actually do require that, Margot.
I haven't seen it on the applications I've seen. So is this something
it's
recently from
We-
2021?
Well, even prior to Ordinance 3106, which was passed on July 27, 2021, we did require property management plans. And as part of that property management plan is annual water use estimates. They are required to create a table. So we are in the application process, the applicants submit that information. Now, as of last year, they've been required to go further and submit a hydrological report as well as a drought management plan. What is their plan in the state of a drought or emergency? How are they going to approach that? And a lot of that comes down to scaling, implementing different mitigation measures to save water, and then it could eventually lead to scaling back their operation. So it is a requirement. And again, going back to Bart's comment on cumulative impacts, we are able to see, and I'm mapping out both the projected water use from the applicant's point of view of what they expect to use versus the projected water uses, which is what our staff is calculating based on industry research, and what we can expect as to how much water is generally used per acre feet. And then we can go, now we're starting to reach a point where we can go one step further and get the actual water use, because even once they're permitted, they're required to submit an annual report for their operations, to where they have their well meters, which are required, and how much water they're using. And then we can get that into a single database and then a geodatabase to map that out. So we're starting to see the reality of water use as opposed to the speculative water use. So.
Okay, so my thought was that if the projected water use was on the permit or the grant, proposed, that would be easier for code enforcement, enforcement to take a look and see at a glance that, estimated water usage is in line with actual water usage. But going back to my main point is the permit applications that I saw did refer to hydrology reports, did refer to a water usage estimate, but it was generic. And a lot of those permits, applications, they refer to the same study that was not in Lake County, and there is a question about that water usage estimate in that study. So if the county has moved forward and has beefed up its requirement on water estimation, I am delighted.
Well, we have, but it's still a work in progress. I think earlier discussion and really something that board members have mentioned is that it would be beneficial to have a peer review process in the hydrology reports and have a county designated hydrogeologist, because we're mostly dealing with groundwater as opposed to surface water. So, but those are still in the works. We're going to be addressing those issues in the weeks and months to come. But thank you for that input. I think everyone's biggest concern here is the water. So.
Thank you.
Bart has her hand up.
Okay, Bart.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. In her first presentation to the Board of Supervisors, Mary Darby said that prior to her arrival, that to her knowledge, the staff had not been, the staff of the Community Development Department had not been adequately or properly trained to read hydrology reports. This is extremely important. Recently, another matter has come up in the Board of Supervisors as to whether the department had in working ability their tracking computer program. So it's extremely important that this task force, again, be able to be realistic in creating an ordinance that actually works within the abilities of the present county department. And I wonder if anyone can speak to what is the status of the ability of the department to read hydrology reports at this time.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment, Bart. We will be addressing that. Essentially, we do receive those. They get part of the initial study, which goes out for state review. So there is a chance for experts to review those and comment on them. But we can definitely improve that process. I think there's room for that in the future. But I think for now, if there's no one else with their hand raised, we're getting close to the end of our allotted time. We have 5 minutes to go. I guess if we can go ahead and close public comment if there's no more hands raised.
Margot's hand was raised. Is this something new, Margot?
Yes, something new. Thank you. I believe this is, or maybe in the fall is the time when the Planning Commission goes out in the field to gather data on water usage from those who are granted permits. So I think it would be most helpful to get some input from code enforcement, to see what would they find helpful to help them determine whether growers are in compliance.
Okay, well, that responsibility falls on planning staff. Code enforcement is not out there collecting the water data. Planning staff is working with code enforcement to do that. A lot of that's submitted actually in their annual reports once they are approved and permitted. But with that said, and with no one else's hand raised, I think I can address that a little bit, because I want to touch upon what we can expect for the next meeting. The county has held a handful of workshops earlier this summer, and we've been open to public comments on cannabis, and we have quite a bit collected. So in our next meeting, we're going to go through all of the concerns. We're going to try to group them and categorize them as we make a plan to address them all section by section of the ordinance as we move forward to hash out those details. So with that said, a lot of these concerns and comments, we're going to be going through them comprehensively in the next meeting. That said, and
real quick, Andrew.
Oh yes.
There has been some comments shared via chat there. I don't know if you want to accept those questions, or if you don't want to accept the chat.
Ray, are you able to see those?
I could read them out too if she can't find them there.
I think that would be helpful.
I've got them.
Oh, Maria's got them.
Since there was no roll call, could task force members introduce themselves? Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Margot was asking what the programmatic EIR is. Lori, would the task force be open to hearing from community members who live next to a grow during their permit process to see what they went through and what concerns are, as well as it has affected their daily lives? Assuming that's a yes, because we want public input?
That is a yes, and at the same time, mentioning our agenda for the next meeting, we're going to be going through a lot of that. We received, quite a few, if not hundreds of comments that have been compiled, and over the next 2 weeks, among many other things, I will be pulling those together and categorizing and grouping them. So a lot of those can be addressed. And for those who have made those comments, I highly encourage you to, attend, whether virtually or in person, next week's meeting. And if I don't cover what has been said, just by all means, speak up.
And we may have a meeting where we're talking about land use conflicts. So Lori, you might want to just check out our agendas as they go forward to make sure that that you'd be giving the input right when we'd be talking about that subject too. And then Donna just kind of reiterated the one before, introductions would be helpful for Zoom participants. Thank you. We'll take that into consideration for the next one.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to improve each meeting as we embark on that.
Thanks, Jake.
Of course, no problem.
Okay, with that, no other questions or comments, then at right on time at 2:30, we can adjourn the meeting.
Our next meeting is
2 weeks from now, Monday at 1.
Yes. So that will be, let me take a look at the calendar. That will be August 29th at 1 p.m.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing your creative writing skills.
Oh, well.
This is a
hopefully it
challenge.
won't be too creative, keep them a little.